What was the very first psychological trick you learned that blew your mind? If you ask someone to move over to an arbitrary different location to talk, could be 5 feet away, they are much more likely to listen to you and follow instructions. One of my tricks as an elementary school teacher. Talking myself to sleep. I'll think things like, my bed is so comfortable. Sleeping is so easy. I love sleeping. Sleeping is great. Instead of agonizing over why I can't sleep. Positively reinforcing myself is my new lullaby llamau. I taught teenagers in a really tough London school. A colleague taught me a brilliant trick to get a kid to calm down when they were angry. Look them calmly in the eye and say, "What do you want to happen next?" Most of the time they were so caught up in emotion they hadn't thought about the consequences of their dickery. As soon as you prod them to think about consequences, most of them would calm down straight away. Working as a waitress, if I noticed a customer was getting particularly impatient and it looked like they were going to be rude to me when I went over. When I would take the food over and before they got the chance to speak I'd say something like, "So sorry for the wait. Thanks for being so lovely about it." It seemed to catch them off guard and paint them as the nice guy in my eyes. And more often than not their expression would change from pissed off to surprised, then they'd say something like, "Oh, no problem, it's okay." So they could keep being the nice guy and feel good about themselves and I avoid chewing out. My first workplace trick that I still use regularly. People will procrastinate with their own work, but drop everything to quickly correct someone else's work. Example, Bill needs to provide a paragraph of text to go in your company's brochure. He's been dragging his feet forever and it's the last thing you're waiting on, but he keeps putting it off. Go to where his paragraph should be and write a shitty version of what he's supposed to do. Don't invest more than 10 seconds. We do widget services. We are good at it. Our services are good for your widget needs. Send it to Bill saying, "Hey, I filled in the last paragraph about widget services. Can you check and make sure it meets your criteria, and I'll send it along to the boss for approval." You'll have Bill's polished, fully composed text in about 10 minutes. Stop talking. If you want to get more information out of someone, just let them speak. There are times in a conversation that things stop. Most people want to fill this themselves, but don't. Let the other person do it. This is especially useful if you think the person and their story is full of shit. When you want or need something from someone, ask them for help with it. Rather than, "Hey, can you do this for me?" say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" People are more inclined to be helpful than to just take on the task for you. People are more likely to believe something you tell them if it's self-depreciating. You can make up some sort of lie, but if you add something negative about yourself in it, it sounds more believable. Smile as soon as you first see people you want to like you, as you greet them, like, "Hey buddy, how you doing?" And look genuinely happy to see them. Don't matter whether it's girls, guys, young or old. It will make them excited to see you like every time. I don't get it, but there's psychology to it and it actually changed my life. You can give a person talking on their phone an object and they will most likely take it because they are focused on the call. I regularly hand people empty plates, most of the time they just keep talking and don't notice what I'm doing. Minimizing. If you feel like something is a really big chore or you just can't get yourself to get up and go do something, minimize it to a small insignificant part. Instead of doing all the garden work, say you're just going to take the tools out so when you want to work you can. 90% of the time once you're up and doing the small thing, the big bad chore doesn't seem so bad now and you end up doing it. If you want to be involved in any work environment, or feel like an insider during work, you gotta greet everyone you meet right away. If you missed them, turn around, go back, and say something like, "Sorry, I didn't catch your name. I'm." If you don't have time, then take the next chance, even if it's just a hi or a wave. People will see you as assertive and approachable. It doesn't really matter if you're introverted and don't speak to them for the rest of the day or whatever. It kills most of the awkwardness associated with being social with people you may or may not know. Plus, It sets you up for healthy teamwork. I find that when I ask someone if they'd like to be a rewards member, they're more civil with me if I say, "Would you like to be a rewards member or no?" I figure that by saying no at the end I'm insinuating that is completely fine to say no, I don't want to be. I use this on everyone. I've had customers that I see get short with other cashiers when they ask them this. I then ask them my way whenever I'm cashiering and they're completely civil about it. I almost always get from these same people, "No thanks." Not today. I guess some people view this questions as nuisance because in their mind they feel like they're asked this every time at a lot of stores. If someone insults you, either own it or pretend you don't understand. They can't get you on something you admit to, and if they have to explain it, it loses all its impact. Whatever you're scared of doing is only going to last 2 seconds. Then you'll blink and it will be months later and you'll wonder why you were even worried. I figured this out in 8th grade before a presentation I was terrified of giving, and I think of that moment every time I'm nervous to do something, and now I'm 28. Time flies. No point of worrying about it. By walking with your head and eyes forward like you're deliberately going somewhere, people will move out of your way. I first tried this in a crowd mall when I was 14 and was blown away. I felt so powerful at 14, lol. Kill them with kindness. Will add nothing eats away at your enemies like that. Short, sweet, simple, and confident does the trick. You could get into a massive argument for hours, fight, cuss, spit, punch, kick. Nothing will really burn them at the core quite as much as being nice to them. I believe it is a psychological trick because they usually don't expect it. They know you're enemies, and it throws them into a loop and off guard. I bumped into my old boss recently. He had absolutely royally screwed me over before I quit, stabbed me square in the back to protect his own hide. I gave him this huge smile, said, "Hey name, good to see you." He gave a weird frown and returned, "Hi. How have you been?" "Better than ever." "How about you?" Fine." He made an obvious effort to keep walking and avoid a conversation. I bumped into him again before I left the place we were at and gave him a nod, nice smile, and the 3-finger wave, sort of like a salute. His face said it all. I hate that guy. Why is he happy? Note: I want to clarify that this isn't effective in all scenarios, and going out of your way to rub false kindness into someone's face negates it altogether. Give young kids the illusion they are making a decision to do something that you really want them to do. Kids won't eat their carrots and wants a dessert now. You say to them, "Do you want to eat your carrots first and then dessert? Or would you like to save your dessert for tomorrow and eat your carrots now?" People who feel guilty will over-explain to justify their actions. I do insurance claims. I don't need to know why you backed into a pole, I don't care. It's covered, all I need is the incident and damage description. But man, some people feel so bad about it, they won't stop going on about how the sun was in their eyes but they should have looked better and they can't believe it happened. And they have a reversing camera and sensors which were supposed to help but they didn't, and they're so angry with themselves and it's a new car and they can't believe they've done this. Humans have a tendency to take or give things if you put your hand out while talking to them. Really common in sales or just messing with friends. In sales I often hand the person the item I'm selling and most often they take it without even realizing it. More likely to buy it too. I've chatted with a friend and put my hand out and he just gave me his phone. 5 minutes late he's wondering where his phone is. A therapist told me that anger is a secondary emotion and should be treated like a traffic light. You should stop at yellow before jumping to red. Ask yourself, what was the first thing come to your mind triggered you? Is it being angered, feeling trapped, unheard, insecure, etc.? Because your first thought is what you actually feel, your anger comes last. I'm a calm-natured person, rarely get angry. This advice helped me to identify my weaknesses and anxiety. You can apply this to any emotion, not just anger. Want someone to tell you a secret? Just start guessing out loud. People have the tendency to correct you. I've had people revealing their full passwords to me, starting off by saying, "You look like someone that would put an exclamation mark at the end of their password." No? Well then it's probably your birth date. and so on. Getting through a job interview. When I first graduated I really struggled, had a couple of rejections and picked up a self-help book. The first tip was just smile. They already think you're qualified, the interview is to check you're going to fit in. I didn't have time to read any further, so I felt completely unprepared. The entire interview was all jokes and laughter and I got the job. It was for a creative role, so most of these kinds of jobs don't do any weird testing or have any formal questioning or metrics. Paying someone a compliment before a difficult conversation or fight. Specifically, one tied to the value in your opinion of them. For example, I really appreciate the mature, level-headed way you handled yourself in our last discussion, or your patience and understanding in situations like this is something I really admire about you. It's the upgraded, more subtle version of the "thank you for your understanding" line you see in customer service a lot. The I and me pronouns are important, as it changes a generic compliment into an opinion or feeling you have about them. It sets a subconscious goal for the person that they will often try to live up to. It's like the subconscious goes, why yes, I am those things, let me prove that you're right, but also adds a little weight that your opinion of them will decrease if they don't. Sometimes I feel bad for using it, because it's almost too manipulative. Especially if I'm lying about that opinion. Here's a trick for seeming like a genius. Instead of that, just get out there and start driving towards somewhere with lots of restaurants, and when she inevitably asks, "Where are we going?" just respond, "Oh, somewhere you like," and make her guess. She'll state the things that are on her mind, and when one of her guesses sounds appealing to you too, just go, "Yep, you guessed it," and head that way. It'll seem like you had it planned from the start but were being playful. This is going to sound obvious, but it honestly didn't click for me until after high school. People will like you if you're nice to them and genuine. Also, people like when you show vulnerability and weakness. Sadly, up through high school I thought showing weakness was bad and it was more important to show strength and kindness. It was a miserable time and those habits took a long time to break. Learning how to kickstart your own hypnagogic hallucinations to shut off your brain and quickly go to sleep. You basically force yourself to start visualizing the abstract imagery that your brain produces when you would normally start to drift off to sleep, and stop using the language part of your brain. It's like kickstarting sleep instead of waiting for it to happen. As a longtime insomniac from a family of insomniacs, this has been one of the most shockingly effective and potentially life-saving mind hacks I have ever learned. Seriously, read up on it and give it a try. You know how small yappy dogs and tiny mice running around are terrifying despite us logically being much larger? Well, in kendo there is the Disarming Scream, where you run at your opponent with a loud scream. When I've attempted doing my kendo practice, despite warning the person of what I'm about to do, they inevitably drop the sword and can't take it. I've used this trick even without my old bamboo practice sword. I ran at a violent mugger who was beating a young student. I'm a small woman, but the guy still ran off. I've also used this trick to literally throw a guy more than twice my size. Don't recommend unless you know how to do a judo throw, so basically, if you don't have an alternative. Loud scream coinciding with running at your opponent works very well at disarming someone. Funny enough, it came from Reddit. It's that trick where when you're talking to someone, and they reply with, "What?" as if they didn't hear you. Instead of repeating yourself, just keep staring at them without saying anything. Almost 99% of the time the person will then continue without you having to repeat yourself. I told my friend that I was doing this and he got mad. About 5 years ago I had a house that I would host parties at. As dumb young 20s aged people, we would smoke cigarettes. If I didn't have a lighter I would ask for one. Eventually, I decided to try something. I had a joke where I would snap my fingers and say, "I wish I was the Human Torch" or some shit. After the small giggle someone would offer a lighter. As I did it more often, I noticed that I wouldn't have to make the joke and someone would hand me a lighter. It got to a point where if I snapped my fingers my roommate would grab his pocket out of instinct. That's the story about how I Pavloved a few of my friends. I tend to procrastinate. A lot. I've given myself this rule where I will internally count down from whatever number, and when I hit 0 I have to do the thing or else. Example, in the shower, depressed, letting the water run over me. I don't want to get out but I'm wasting water. Begin counting down from 30, 29, 28, 27, 2, 3, 2, 1. Put hand on dial and turn it off without any thought. The only thought is 0. I do this for lots of things. When my 3 sons were pretty young, think Irish twins but more like triplets, when they would tell a fib their faces would give it away. Besides the eyes and the expression on their little faces, their little foreheads would wrinkle up from their eyes getting so big when they'd fib. Their eyebrows would go up really high on their foreheads and then wrinkles would show. They were all really cute with their tells. So, one day I told my sons, I know you're lying because your forehead lights up. Literally, their wrinkled little foreheads is what I meant. But they were 3, 2, and 1. In an attempt to conceal their little white lies as an attempt to outsmart their mama, they began to cover their foreheads. If I couldn't see their foreheads I wouldn't see the lit up forehead after all. Then after a few times of this happening the 3 boys got so confused about my magic abilities to see what they were so cleverly hiding. What's funny, now that they're grown men they still have the same tells when they try to keep the whole truth to me, and still they don't get why I always know when one isn't being honest. I don't know if this qualifies but I found a weird defensive trick in basketball. Assuming you're in a defensive stance, knees bent, legs spread further than width of shoulders. Ready to shuffle quickly to one side or another, and the person with the ball tries to drive by you towards the basket, if you stop and hold your ground, most of the time they will run into you. This is a charge. So your ball. As an added bonus, when they run into you they usually hit their inner thigh on your knee, giving themselves a Charlie horse. So sometimes they writhe on the ground in pain for a few minutes too. Talk enough to get the other person talking, yes. That is sales. And you can frame almost any situation by humming or whistling a tune, think Darth or High Hopes tune, before you even enter a room. Are you sick or okay? You don't look okay? Can I get you something? Gosh. You look like you are going to pass out. Near perfect response when employed properly, over several interactions, especially if you get another person involved. Does Bill look okay to you? He looks pale or something. Done. Bill is going home sick. Not to be overused, but can be super effective at getting rid of annoying persons, co-workers, or idiots. It wasn't the first, but it definitely surprised me with its effectiveness. I was a teenager with a 3 years younger sister still in the preteen phase. I learned how to form an intense expression where from my POV it felt like my eyes were going blank and it was in the realm of resting bitch face. But it was more like I made sure absolutely no emotion could touch my expression. But then I'd stare with intensity. That would stop her cold in her track of whatever she was doing for a while. I used it sparingly. Then that summer I was kind of a camp counselor, but I was more like an assistant babysitter. And somehow it just worked amazingly on all the kids. They really thought they had pissed me off or truly crossed a line when I used that lack of expression. It was hard not to laugh. They would ignore the adult counselors to the same level kids always do, but I'd pull that expression and they would fall in line. I learned this at work. It was referred to as the forced sell. Basically you offer the customer or your chosen person a choice of 2 options and by default they are obliged to make a choice without realizing. An example, a customer comes in looking for a set of headphones. They tell you what features they want and how much they want to spend. To encourage them to make a purchase, you could ask them if they want the £45 headphones or if they wanted to spend a little more and get a higher quality pair for £60. In reality they might not want either of the headphones, but at that point in time you are forcing them to make a choice, which in most cases will persuade them into buying. You could also use this at home or at work by giving the other person a choice of 2 jobs, forcing them to pick one when they might not want to do either. Do you want to help with the washing up or would you rather do the hoovering? That kind of thing. If you have a boss who is always telling you to make alterations to reports, documents, proposals or whatever it is you write in your job, throw in a couple of spelling mistakes. He'll get his fix of acting smarter than you while you don't have to think of new ways to write the same thing differently just to pander to them. I once went to training for handling media interviews. Something they described and demonstrated is how reporters can make you look bad in an interview. They recorded a video of me answering a question by a reporter. The question was a bit sneaky in that the first part of the question seemed tame but took an evil turn right at the end. Something like your company has a great philanthropic arm which supports many good causes including environmental efforts. How would they feel about the waste you're putting into the waters at your Colfax plant? They recorded the interview typical style where you can see the back of the interviewer but only see my face and used a separate camera for the interviewer. I thought I'd done pretty well and followed the training, but when we looked at the recording as an edited piece I looked bad because I smiled when he talked about the wastewater part. Definitely evil genius look. I didn't even realize I'd done it and I wondered why I smiled. Then they showed me the reverse angle, that was edited out. Just as he was speaking the shitty part of the question the reporter intentionally smiled, and psychologically we are trained to smile back when someone smiles at us. It was an amazing lesson. Keeping things about yourself private until the perfect moment. I don't tell people much about myself from the get-go. I purposely never mention my profession, my family life, religion, where I'm from, etc. in conversations with people I just met. I keep the topics more general and friendly. Those seeking approval or like-mindedness for their opinions, prejudices, beliefs will often blurt out exactly what they think when they begin to trust you. That's the perfect time to say, well, actually, I'm blank. It's fun to see their facial expression and try to backtrack on all the terrible things they just said about people like you. But there's no justifying it. It's a good way to test whether or not you'd want someone like this in your life before you cultivate a friendship. On the flip side, you'll find that most people are cool with your individuality and support it. Those people are keepers. Lying. If you want to lie perfectly about where you went or what did you do, supposing you went to the bus stop and want to lie that you went to the hospital after you went to the bus stop. Don't say, I went to the bus stop and got a call from my mom. I heard that my dad is in the hospital so I took the bus and I went to the hospital. Instead, say, I went to the bus stop and got a call that my dad is in the hospital so I came here. Keep it as short as you can. There's one that's not seen much anymore. You make a pyramid of sevens, ending with a row of 7 sevens, and ask someone to say them as if they are actual numbers, 7, 77, 777, etc. Before they begin, tell them that you're going to ask them a question when they finish, which they must answer immediately. If done correctly, they almost always say carrots. This only works if they immediately answer. If they hesitate or repeat the question, it won't work. I have no idea why this works. People are more likely to be convinced if you stroke their ego first, and show you're on their side. That means finding very specific compliments, so it comes across as genuine, or setting up the argument by telling them how their views have merit before you offer a better option. If you say they're wrong right off the bat, they're no longer hearing you out with an open mind, but rather only listening to make counter-arguments because they're on the defense. Maybe not so much a trick, but success is the best revenge. When I was 15 I was discovered as a model. Before that I was a total nerd, nothing special. I was good in school, that was basically it. But I noticed that when I became a model, suddenly some of my friends constantly tried to undermine every aspect of my life. They were trying to one-up me. Trying to remind me of how shit my life actually is. I always was the poorest in my friend group and suddenly my friends would Snapchat me pictures of very expensive stuff they bought. Started bragging about how much money they have, etc. They'd do all these subtle undermining shit that they never did before. The more successful I became, the more I could see the frustration in my fake friends' behavior. I'd say becoming successful, or in some sense, more successful than those who are close to you, really makes you see what weaknesses someone has. They'll just basically lay it out on a platter for you without even knowing it. And you immediately get to find out who your real friends are and who is fake. Kind of depressing, but it teaches you a lot about what people are really like. I read somewhere that if someone is being loud, try speaking really quietly and they'll match your volume. I work in TV, so we were filming with a presenter in public and some member of the public runs up to me and the camera all, "Wow, oh my god, what are you filming?" So I replied calmly and softly, "Oh, just something for blah blah, yeah, just filming our presenter blah blah," and they instantly stop shouting and reply back in the same quiet voice, "Work's a treat." Everyone in the office has flaws. Some people can be difficult to work with, but stroke their ego a little bit and they will melt and turn to butter. "Thanks, I didn't know that." "Oh, that's good to know, you're very good at this particular task or subject. If you need to know something about X, then James is the guy to ask." Happened to me in college. Was in a class, believe it or not, and I had the hiccups. Had them for all of 5 minutes before my teacher asked the class, "Who's got hiccups?" I sheepishly raised my hand, and then he just sticks his hand in his pocket, takes out his wallet, slips a £10 note out of his wallet, puts it on the desk and says, "If you hiccup again, that's yours," and that was the last of my hiccups that day. I couldn't believe it until I tried it on my friends, and every single time they just stopped with the hiccups once they saw the money. Crazy how it actually works. If someone is emotionally angry, asking them technical and analytical questions forces the other side of their brain to become active, and will usually calm them down. For example, if you're a customer service rep, a customer calls up and is obviously angry about blank, start asking questions regarding specific dates, amounts, or anything that would force them to think logically. Works almost every time. Believing I can do what I set my mind to. Turns out I've always been able to turn the head on my diagnoses ADHD by going through the uncomfortable process of forcing myself to concentrate on something. I've gotten good grades in my degree, focused and fully involved myself in conversations and narratives and stories, as well as immersing myself in moments that matter to me instead of getting distracted. Works wonders. Just have to try hard. I usually do this with kids as I work with kids, so I'm not sure how well this would work on older people. If you want something to be done, don't ask, tell them. For example, you wouldn't say, "Can you pick up the sock?" You'd say, "Pick up the sock." It gives them less of an opportunity to refuse. Of course they still can, but with that approach they're less likely to, as you've put that expectation on them. I invented a game to teach myself how to spot a hallucination and differentiate it from reality. I blew the doctor's mind. Haha. I used to hallucinate because of a head injury. The game is simple. First you perceive something. You recognize that you have perceived it, then you try to work out what it is by process of elimination. My hallucinations were mostly auditory. I once heard my grandma speaking Korean. That was determined to be a hallucination because she doesn't speak Korean. Another time I heard someone shouting my name from behind me. I was alone, so that was a hallucination too. But the sound of the sewing machine running in the early morning when I was the only one awake wasn't a hallucination, even though I thought it was. My housemate heard it too. It turned out to be a rat in the attic. And that's how you score, by the way. You guess based on the evidence and then ask a healthy person if they heard or saw or felt the thing too. If I told my mom she was pretty, it would make her happy, and it would be more likely that she'll let me play video games. I must have been 4 years old. I really wanted to play GameCube. It stopped working after maybe the 3rd time, but she could tell I really wanted to play GameCube, so she would just drag my compliments out of me a little more before letting me play. I remember one time she was dragging it on so much I got so frustrated and I believe I gave up and got baby depressed. Mom doesn't let me play GameCube. 4-year-old me. Life is suffering. Until she felt sorry for me and let me play GameCube. Damn. Crazy times. Lol. Edit. I haven't learned any psychological tricks since then. Pretty late now, but this is one my father showed me which anyone can use. Its purpose is to make people like and trust you. So, when people are stating something, like for example complain about their boss being an ass, you listen, and then just repeat what they said, but with your own wording. I've done this myself in the past and it works really well. Best case scenario is when you are just getting to know someone. You can really start to gauge someone for what kind of person they are if you use reverse psychology, in the sense that you present them with the option to do something you seemingly don't want them to, and they do it anyways. I have distanced myself from friends after telling them I got a new tattoo and that it still hurt. It didn't, and their first reaction was to smack it. Then followed up later on with similar scenarios where they opted to choose the negative route that I established as an option. Another one is taking any chance to do a small favor for someone else, especially when it's a new acquaintance. I'm not saying drop at their feet and wait on their every need, but taking the initiative to show them you're an asset to them, even through small acts like getting yourself a soda and offering them one, will add up to them doing you a favor when you need it without much thought. If you want to seem extremely interesting and really stand out from everyone else, speak quite loudly to initially make yourself heard. Once you are sure that people are listening, you, slowly but surely, start to replace more and more words in each sentence with the word catawampus. As this goes on, make sure to increase your usage of the word, while also increasing in volume. Eventually you'll be screaming catawampus in the middle of a crowded bar on a Friday night. Everyone around you will be amazed. You're welcome. This is very specific but works every time. If you're with your so somewhere and you'd leave then for a brief moment alone, and when you come back someone is hitting with them, instead of getting upset, just casually introduce yourself and then proceed to be very friendly with the random, and basically don't let him/her to chat with your so, but center the conversation asking random question. Non-stop. In 5 minutes tops they will leave, guaranteed. Silence is more powerful than speaking. Story time in how I know it works. Had to do a math oral test. Just answer some questions on some theory. Demonstrate how to solve a few problems, then you're done. I was one of the final few that had to do it, because it was first a way for kids who were failing to fix their grades and also get that oral grade in. So I'm on the online class. 2 hours after school finished. It's me, the teacher, and 5 others, one of which is a loudmouth and chatterbox. We start. The teacher starts with me. I answer the questions perfectly. No mistakes. Nothing. Perfect oral test. It lasted about 3 minutes, my oral test. Then he moves on to the others, which took longer. It took even longer since the loudmouth would constantly talk. So him talking, the teacher doing the tests, plus the moments in which the group chat, it lasted for 2 hours, during which I barely said a word. Only when addressed to, and I kept it short. We reach the end. Teacher gives us our grades, starting with me. He goes up, you answered you questions perfectly, no problems whatsoever. Just try to talk a little bit more. Your grade is an 8, about a B+/A-. Really good and really hard to get. He then proceeds to tell the grade of the loudmouth. He goes, you did well too. Made a few errors, here and there, but you fixed them quite quickly and you spoke a lot. A bit too much, I'm afraid. 6.5, still passing, but just barely. Kid flips out, saying he couldn't do this to him, that he was included. Then he goes, barely said a word, and he got a higher grade than me. I respond, yeah, because I know when to shut up. The teacher was awesome and replied by saying exactly. Kid never said a word after that. Everyone else got a 7.5 as their grade. So I ended up with the highest grade.